Hello, everyone, and welcome to Unraveling Politics. In this show, I discuss the political news of the day and provide my analysis in a way that hopefully everyone can understand. So, there's a couple major stories I want to talk about. First of all, the last week, the biggest story of the day was probably the Trump trial. We're going to talk about that later. First, because I already made an episode about that, a special episode on Thursday. So I want to talk about the war in Israel and Gaza. There was an AI-generated image that went viral last week. 30 million times it was seen in 24 hours on Tuesday and Wednesday. And this, keep in mind, this is a limited invasion thus far. And Israel's been gradually deploying troops. Over Memorial Day weekend, there was a tragic mishap, according to Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, where many civilians died in a missile strike. Now, if you remember correctly, something else like this happened on Easter, so Netanyahu seems to be waiting until Americans are on holiday to make strikes. So I would be wary and be ready for the 4th of July. Anyway, Israel has said the war could last past the November election, which will keep the war on top of mind for voters for more than 7 months. And that's obviously going to be a political problem for the Biden administration because that has deeply divided Democrats. Israel now has control of southern Gaza's border with Egypt, and international aid has dropped by over 2/3 since the Rafah invasion. So, what we know here is there's a 3-point plan to end the war in Gaza, according to President Biden. Has come up with Israel. The first phase would be 6 weeks of a full and complete ceasefire with withdrawal of Israeli troops from the populated areas of Gaza. There would be a release of women and children held hostage, and 600 trucks daily of aid would enter Gaza. There would also be a negotiation for a permanent ceasefire. In Phase 2, after the negotiations are complete, there would be a release of all hostages for Palestinians in Israel, and Phase 3 would be reconstruction of Gaza and return of deceased hostages to their loved ones. So Biden has urged Israel and Hamas to use this as a roadmap to an enduring ceasefire and the release of all hostages. He's also said it's time for this war to end and for the day after to begin. However, some in the Israeli war cabinet, as I briefly mentioned, I think it was in the last regular episode, will not let the war end. There's also some people who want the war to end. So there's been a great tension between the two. That's between the two sides in the cabinet, and it could lead to a collapse of the Israeli war cabinet. A total war defeat of Hamas would only further isolate Israel and bog them down like we were in Iraq and Afghanistan. Jonathan Pinkoff, a senior U.S. intelligence officer and now is at the Atlantic Council, a Washington-based think tank, he said, and I totally agree with him, if Hamas rejects the proposal, the Biden administration will use this to say that it has done all possible to seek a ceasefire and Hamas is responsible for the continuation of violence. So this is something that the Biden administration obviously wants it to end. If they can get the war to end immediately, or at least get the ceasefire, which is what a lot of the protesters on college campuses have been saying they want, then it's possible that we can move past this and that people will either decide to vote for Biden or they will just not vote for somebody else, like a third-party candidate. Because all we need to do is wait for a third-party candidate, which I am going to talk about a third-party candidate in just a little bit, who will stop and cut off aid for Israel. And that could really siphon off votes. That's just the theory I have, that if a third-party candidate emerges that would promise to cut off all Israeli aid, they could receive popular left-wing support. So, now, what do voters think about it? Because that's what we're focused on here. We're focused on voters and elections and politics, not so much wars. 81% of voters under the age of 35 disapprove of Biden's handling. As someone under the age of 35, I can say I'm confidently within the 81% of voters. And they've even been calling him Genocide Joe. According to a Pew Research Center poll, this was back in March, so it's probably only gotten worse since then. 34% say that Israel's way of handling the ceasefire is unacceptable, or handling the fighting is unacceptable. 73% of Hamas say that Hamas's way of handling is unacceptable. So 34%, that's a significant portion of the population. 3% of Americans say a lasting peace is very likely or extreme or likely. 68% say it's unlikely. I'm in the unlikely camp. And 20% have no opinion. Now, among Democrats and Republicans, 52% of Democrats say how Israel is fighting the Hamas is unacceptable, while only 17% of Republicans say it was unacceptable. No independents were listed in this poll, and approximately a third of Democrats say that the response is unacceptable in another poll. Now, the people who believe that Israel has valid reasons for fighting Hamas, among Democrats, 52% agree. Among Republicans, 70% agree. So there's definitely a Democrat-Republican split. Between independents are probably split pretty equally. There's definitely a Republican-Democrat split between the two parties, between the conflict. So my anticipation is, if this war does not end, as I said earlier, a lot of younger voters that Biden needed to win in 2020, and you think about it, it's been 4 years. There's a lot more voters who might be supporting Democrats that were not able to vote in the last election. Like I was not able to vote in the last election. I'm not saying I will support Biden. I'm just saying that it will be something that they need to consider. A lot of these younger voters who are they're more sympathetic to the Palestinian cause. If Biden was expecting those votes now, he should not be guaranteed to get them again. Now, on to Donald Trump. Obviously, we covered this a little bit more in the episode of last week, or the first episode of last week. It was a bit of a shock of the result, so I would highly recommend, if you have not listened to it, that you go back and listen to that. So, Trump now has an appeal. He has said he will appeal. He will have to wait until the 11th of July, which is 4 days before the Republican convention. Trump said in a 33-minute speech in the lobby of Trump Tower, he said he would appeal. He has 30 days after July 11th, which would be August the 10th. Here is a clip of Trump and his reaction to the guilty verdict.
It's a disgrace. This was a rigged trial by a conflicted judge who was corrupt. It's a rigged trial, a disgrace. They wouldn't give us a venue change. We were at 5% or 6% in this district, in this area. This was a rigged, disgraceful trial. But the real verdict is going to be November 5th by the people. And they know what happened here, and everybody knows what happened here. You have a Soros-backed DA and the whole thing. We didn't do a thing wrong. I'm a very innocent man, and it's okay. I'm fighting for our country. I'm fighting for our Constitution. Our whole country is being rigged right now. This was done by the Biden administration in order to wound or hurt an opponent, a political opponent. And I think it's just a disgrace. And we'll keep fighting. We'll fight till the end and we'll win. Because our country's gone to hell. We don't have the same country anymore. We have a divided mess. We're a nation in decline, serious decline. Millions and millions of people pouring into our country right now. From prisons and from mental institutions, terrorists. And they're taking over our country. We have a country that's in big trouble. But this was a rigged decision right from day one with a conflicted judge who should have never been allowed to try this case, never. And we will fight for our Constitution. This is long from over. Thank you very much.
As you can see, there's very little surprise as to what Trump has said. He definitely is going to appeal this case, as he has said. And I have right here that he has called the judge a tyrant, biased, and corrupt. Now, normally, if you are convicted of a crime, you do not go after the judge or attack the DA, especially after you violated a gag order 10 times. But this is not just a trial, this is about politics. I would highly recommend Trump be quiet from here on out about the trial, at least until July 11th. If there is an appeal, the judge will likely suspend any sentence or punishment until after the appeals process is over. Personally, I want to see the judge do a community service. I think that could be kind of funny. Maybe Trump could give some water bottles to illegal immigrants down at the border. That would be pretty funny. Okay, so let's see. This is President Biden's reaction. I thought he had a pretty good, he didn't make it political. It was already very politicized, so he kind of kept it cool, and this is his reaction.
Before I begin my remarks, I just want to say a few words about what happened yesterday in New York City. The American principle that no one is above the law was reaffirmed. Donald Trump was given every opportunity to defend himself. It was a state case, not a federal case, and it was heard by a jury of 12 citizens, 12 Americans, 12 people like you, like millions of Americans who served on juries. This jury is chosen the same way every jury in America is chosen. It was a process that Donald Trump's attorney was part of. The jury heard 5 weeks of evidence, 5 weeks. And after careful deliberation, the jury reached a unanimous verdict. They found Donald Trump guilty on all 34 felony counts. Now he'll be given the opportunity, as he should, to appeal that decision just like everyone else has that opportunity. That's how the American system of justice works. And it's reckless, it's dangerous, it's irresponsible for anyone to say this was rigged just because they don't like the verdict. Our justice system has endured for nearly 250 years. And it literally is the cornerstone of America, our justice system. The justice system should be respected, and we should never allow anyone to tear it down. It's as simple as that. That's America. That's who we are. And that's who we'll always be, God willing.
The Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, has predicted that the Supreme Court of the United States would overturn the result. In April, a Reuters and Ipsos poll said a quarter of Republicans would not support him. And the Trump campaign, I did allude to this in our last episode, that the campaign site has gone down. Now we have some more information. $35 million was raised in a single day after the guilty verdict, and that is double the previous record according to the Trump campaign. So let me pull this up here. Abroad, Trump's allies, Viktor Orban in Hungary, he's the prime minister, and Russian President Vladimir Putin has said that the Biden administration is trying to eliminate political opponents, which is deeply ironic considering that's what Putin and Orban do. The deputy prime minister of Italy has said they will have full solidarity and support with Trump. The UK's opposition Labour Party, the likely next prime minister, Keir Starmer, has said he will work with whoever Americans elect. Japan, for example, has no comment on the situation. So, international leaders, Trump is waiting. Trump has his allies, of course. We're waiting to see what will happen. It's not super clear how they will react, but if Trump is elected president, world leaders are going to be forced to interact with him, at least somewhat, because Trump will be the president of the largest or the most powerful country in the world. Speaking of the election, we did not have a poll on the day of the sentencing because you can't just whip up a poll like that. There have been 2 polls that came out since the guilty verdict, and we know it was after the guilty verdict because the questions were included in the poll. One of the polls, let me see if I can find my notes here. 2 polls post-conviction, according to Forbes, 51% of voters would vote for Trump and 49% would vote for Biden. And according to Reuters, 39% would vote for Trump and 41% would vote for Biden. So that's basically a 2-point lead on each side. I wouldn't take 2 polls. Forbes and Reuters are probably not, Reuters probably more so than Forbes, are not exactly like the most reliable polls. So we'll have to wait and see. As I said, we might see a bit of a poll bounce in the beginning. Maybe not. I've been wrong before. Even on the show, I've been wrong. It's pretty unlikely that there would be a poll much of a change, at least in the immediate term, because not much has actually changed. Yes, Trump has been convicted, but there's going to be an appeal, and he hasn't been sentenced. The sentencing is over a month away. So that's what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to wait and see. We'll definitely know by our next episode, which will come out on June the 10th, we will know a little bit more about the post-conviction polls. And as I said, it might rally his base even more. Although his base is already pretty rallied, so maybe not. We'll see. As for the third-party candidate, there's a libertarian candidate. His name is Chase Oliver. He has called himself armed and gay. and he said he will end the genocide in Gaza. So there you go. There's a candidate that somebody could support that I alluded to earlier, that people who are angry with Biden's and Trump's opinions on Gaza, how Trump would handle it and how Biden has been handling it. He's libertarians saw Trump as authoritarian, which, to be fair, I can see why they think that. 38-year-old Oliver said young voters don't want octogenarians running their lives, which is true. In the 2020 presidential election, the Libertarian candidate got 1.2%. In 2016, it got 3.3%. And in 2012, it got 1%. So I would expect probably around 2016, maybe between 2020, which was 1.2, and 2016, which was 3.3, maybe a little bit more. So that could be somebody that could garner some votes. Trump originally tried to get the Libertarian Party nomination. He even told them at their convention and was booed. He said, "Libertarians keep getting your 3% every 4 years." So he's definitely mad at them, or definitely not keeping them on his side. And in other news, Joe Manchin has now announced that he will be running as an independent, or he will be an independent, and he could run for West Virginia Senate or for governor there. He's more serious about a run for governor, according to certain reports. But if he does run for Senate as an independent, that would, he would definitely lose. You'd be splitting votes with a Democrat. He will still caucus with the Democrats, as does Bernie Sanders, Kristen Sinema, and Angus King do. So that's going to be interesting. I would think Joe Manchin, who was governor until 2010, is likely to run for governor again. He beat the guy that's running for governor, the Republican running for governor, when that Republican was running for Senate, and that was 6 years ago, if that made any sense. Hopefully it did. So that's going to be another thing. It's a very, very interesting election going on right now, not just for Senate and for president, but for Senate as well. Congress is, of course, really important, because if Trump is elected president, he's going to need a Republican Congress to push through his agenda. Yes, I have heard Project 2025, which is about taking full control of the executive branch, and it's unitary executive theory. But ultimately, without the power of Congress, you're not going to be able to get much permanent done. If Biden wins, but there's a Republican majority in Congress, then Biden's ability to complete anything is going to be very limited. In fact, it's probably going to be so limited that he will get nothing done, and he might even face an impeachment vote. Speaking of impeachment, I also wanted to mention Hunter Biden will be on trial beginning today, if I remember correctly. He's very likely to be convicted. I think the evidence against him is pretty strong. He was convicted of a crime, yet he lied about it on a gun background check in Delaware. And that is a federal crime, and there is proof that he was convicted, and there is proof he signed it. So if he gets convicted, which Republicans don't think he will because they think it's rigged, but if he gets convicted, that's going to be a big headache for Biden. But then again, Hunter Biden is not president. He is not running for president. He never will be president. Hunter does sound a lot like a Russia. So that is something we'll have to watch out for. I promise, though, we will not be spending all of our time talking about Israel and the Trump trial. I do hope next episode we can talk about something that is coming up. I do want to cover more of the Trump Veep stakes, who is going to be vice president. That'll probably be a special episode coming out probably at the end of this month, because if the Republican convention is in the middle of July, we'll have to know the nominee or the vice presidential candidate before then. And there's also a presidential debate coming up at the end of June, so that's going to be interesting. Anyway, thank you for listening. I hope you learned something, and please feel free to give it a 5-star rating, this show, and we will be back again next Monday. Thank you.